Viewers and subscribers, welcome back to Beating the Press podcast. I am your host, Rafa. Now, coming up in this evening's episode, we're going to be looking at that big semi-final matchup coming up in the Gold Cup, Jamaica versus Mexico. And of course, we will first look back at what brought these two teams to this semi-final stage of this year's Gold Cup. Of course, Jamaica taking care of business against Guatemala and Mexico blanking Costa Rica 2-0 to book their spot in the semi-final. And this one taking place on Sunday over there in Nevada. This should be a big showcase event, and I'm definitely looking forward to this one. Now, of course, Jamaica faced Guatemala and did fairly well in order to secure a 1-0 victory. No surprises in terms of the starting 11 from coach Hal Grimson. A settled backline, it would appear at this point in time. And of course, the team is constantly gelling as the players become more familiar with each other. And of course, that is now 3 games on the bounce, 3 victories under Helgrimson in this Gold Cup. And I'm sure the confidence in the team should now be oozing. It wasn't necessarily the best of matches against Guatemala, but of course the team did enough to get that 1-0 victory, a brilliant build-up play there. Gray taking on the dribble, faking the shot, and picking out a sublime pass from picking out a run from Amari Bell to pretty much slot in the back of the net, a quite a confident finish there. And that was pretty much the game. 1-0 victory. The team played fairly well, Jamaica that is. However, I am still concerned about the central midfield position. A team like Guatemala, we should be taking care of the ball a bit better, somewhat dominating possession, but it was a tough game, a hard-fought game, a very physical game. The Guatemalan team came and pressed the Jamaican team and won back a few balls on quite a number of occasions. At times, it appears as if the Jamaican team was playing a 4-2-4 formation rather than a 4-4-2, which they are set up in. But, the team was constantly bypassing the midfield. And of course, the ball handlers are just not there for Jamaica currently. We saw where even at halftime, the coach had to make a tactical change and take off Lambert, who was booked late in that first half, pretty much preventing the team from going down to 10 men. And of course, brought on Johnson, who has been, done a fair job coming off the bench in the last 2 games. And he didn't let himself down, but the game did not change much while he was on the park as well. So that midfield three, the coach started with Lambert and Latibodir inside the middle right there. Johnson came on, held his own. But, of that midfield three, there is still much that is needed from that midfield in order for Jamaica to play a more passing game. But from my read of the coach is obviously aware of these deficiencies in the team and as such has set the team up in, the best possible way in order to cope and compensate for these deficiencies, the ball handling skills, as well as picking out a pass, and that tactical awareness is just not where it should be for a top-notch international outfit, which Jamaica is looking to become going forward. The strength in this team lies in that front four, the players with Premier League experience who are playing top-notch games week in, week out for their respective clubs over there in England. Gray from Everton, Antonio from West Ham, Bailey, Aston Villa, and Bobby Reid from Fulham. That's where the strength of the team lies, in that midfield attacking four. And the coach obviously has devised a plan in order to fully utilize the skill set of those 4 players. Antonio with his hustling, bustling style, the defenders often heist it up to him. He's able to hold off defenders, hurry them, hustle them, hold up the ball, knock it off to a Bailey, knock it wide to a Gray, who then takes on a dribble, draws defenders, and then space opens up. So we saw quite a bit of that in this Guatemala game, and it was on one of those occasions where the Guatemalan defense fell asleep, allowing Amari Bell, the left back, to make an inside run, picked out a pass by Gray, or picked out by a pass by Gray, and then he slotted it in the back of the net. And from there on, the Jamaican team weathered the storm. It was a very raucous atmosphere. It was a Guatemalan strong crowd, and they really gave the game a very, atmospheric feel, a very raucous and exciting feel. And of course, you could feel the tension later in the game as the Guatemalan team pushed for an equalizer, but none came. The Jamaican defense stood firm. The Blake, of course, getting that man of the match award and recording another clean sheet. Low, although aggressive at times, held his own, and he is developing quite a formidable partnership with Bernard, I must say. So that defensive duo look like a lock going forward into this Gold Cup and looking further afield into World Cup qualifying campaign. Right now it seems like it's a settled back four along with the goalkeeper. Of course, there was a change at right back, Jovain Brown getting the start over Lambikisi. But of course, Lambikisi came on later in that game. But that looks like a solid enough defensive unit. And then, of course, considering the potential addition of Pinnock, who will add some more experience and know-how, of course, Premier League experience there as well, playing with Brentford in the English Premier League. So with his inclusion, it will be interesting to see who the coach chooses to start in the majority of games in, the upcoming Gold Cup campaign. The upcoming World Cup qualifying campaign. So that's one to look for, but it's important, or it is good that Jamaica now has quality choices in these positions. Once upon a time, we were starved of players, and now we have what you would say, not necessarily an abundance of players, but you have options in various positions. And that is good to see for Jamaica football going forward. But looking afield, looking ahead, we have that big semi-final match coming up. Mexico is the opponent. And this is going to be a tough game. Again, I really don't expect any wholesale changes from Hell Grimson. I expect if there are no injuries, then the majority of the team which played against Guatemala, and for that matter, the majority of the team which has been the starters in this year's version of the Gold Club, should start in that game. Of course, Blake, captain, should be in goal. I would personally go with a similar pairing at the back, Bernard and Lowe. And Jovain Brown, I think he did enough to warrant another starting spot at right back. And of course, Amari Bell locking up the left back position for himself. He should be oozing with confidence at that point after not only getting a goal, but also keeping a clean sheet. And, defensively, he played pretty well, pretty well. He could have rivaled Blake for that man of the match award, in my estimation. Going forward in the midfield, again, I expect Bobby Reid to start. I expect Gray to start. It will be interesting, however, the midfield too. I would say the coach has choices between the three aforementioned players. That would be Latibodier, Lambert, and Johnson. For my money, I would go with a Latibodier Lambert pairing to start. Lambert has the physicality. He's a bustling player, a good tackler of the football. And for this Mexican team, we may need that energy. Additionally, he only played one half of that game, so he should be fairly fresh when compared to the other midfielders, that is Johnson and Latibodier. But looking at the selections that have taken place in previous games, Latibodier seemed to be a favorite of Coach Helgrimson. So I expect Latibodier to start, and I expect Lambert to come back in and add a bit more height, a bit more physicality, and a bit more energy and running in that midfield area. And then, of course, up front, a continuation of the Antonio Leon Bailey partnership. Interestingly enough, I saw a lot of interchanging with the front three or front four in the game versus Guatemala, where Gray and Bailey would switch sides. Oftentimes, you may see a Bailey starting on the left, but then popping up on the right, and a Gray starting on the right and then popping up on the left. So I realized there's quite a bit of fluidity and interchangeability taking place up front. Even Antonio, sometimes he is through the middle, sometimes he pops up left, sometimes he pops up right. So there's good movement among the front three, and they seem to have a good understanding of each other. So I expect those two players to continue leading the line for Jamaica. Again, Antonio yet to get on the score sheet in this version of the Gold Club. This is quite surprising. Even though he is playing quite well, he is yet to trouble, the back of the net. So he will definitely be looking to get his name on the score sheet. So he should be quite hungry. And of course, Mexico has been a long opponent of Jamaica. These two teams are no strangers to each other. Mexico coming off that win against Costa Rica in their quarterfinal match, lost to Qatar 1-0 earlier in the group stages, but still with that loss still managed to top their zone, and now defeating Costa Rica. They are now in the semifinal. Of course, they had lost to the USA earlier in the Nations League, which got their coach sacked. New coach coming in, looking to make an impression. The players seem to have been galvanized by this new coach and are looking to make amends by not only defeating Jamaica to make it to the final, but lifting that Gold Cup title and taking it back to Mexico. So this should be a very hard-fought match. This is obviously a must-win game for both teams. And if it takes penalties to decide the outcome, then that's what it will go down to. Of course, speaking of penalties, USA managed to creep past Canada. That one going down to penalties. So it is Panama and the USA over on the other side of that semi-final bracket. So that one should be a very interesting matchup as well. Of course, the USA coming into the Gold Cup with what you could classify as a weakened squad, exposing and blooding a number of youngsters. And so far, while they may not necessarily be playing flowing football, they have definitely been squeezing out the results and have progressed, I would say at minimum to the semifinals of the competition. Possibly that may have been a target for the coach, at very minimum a semifinal berth. And so said, so done. They are in the semifinal and will be fighting for their life against Panama as well. Of course, the winners will face each other, I believe, in the finals coming up on Sunday. So lots of football still to play, and definitely looking forward to this one. And this one taking place midweek over there in Las Vegas. I believe Jamaica has the late game. I believe Jamaica time, this one should be coming on at 9 p.m. So of course it's taking place in Las Vegas, which is obviously in the western section of the US on a different time zone. So even though we might be seeing the game at 9, over there in Las Vegas, they may be playing a bit earlier in the evening due to the time zone difference. So set your alarm clocks. 9 o'clock Jamaica time is the time for this clash with Mexico. And I am definitely looking forward to this one. In terms of a score prediction, I have to approach this one optimistic. I have to, and This one is a hard one to call, in all honesty. Both teams are playing well. Both teams should be confident going into this one. Tactically, I feel that the Jamaican players have grown in the competition. They are understanding what the coach wants from the team. They are aware of their strengths and their weaknesses, and I believe they are actually playing to those strengths and those weaknesses. I think the coach has them set up in a formation which suits the personnel, a formation which has his best players on the field. And as such, this one should be very competitive again. It's very hard to call, but sentimentally, I have to give Jamaica the edge in this one. I feel it will be a tight game. I feel both teams will score. For me, though, I'm going to go with a 2-1 victory for Jamaica in this one. It should be very tight. It could possibly even go to extra time. My fear, however, is that if Mexico scores first, it might be very difficult for Jamaica to come back, as Jamaica, in their present structure, is more suited to play on the counter-attack. It may be very well to launch attacks on Mexico if Mexico isn't pushing forward and leaving space in behind for Jamaica to exploit on the break with the speed of Bailey, Gray, and Antonio. So if Jamaica goes behind and Mexico is content with soaking up pressure and they themselves playing on the break, it might be challenging for Jamaica to come back from a 1-goal deficit just based on how the team is currently structured and the playing style. So Hal Grimson must engineer a plan B. The Mexican would have studied the tapes, would have seen the dangers, would have seen the patterns, and realized how the Jamaican team is set up and structured to play. And I'm sure they will devise a tactic to minimize the impact of the Jamaican players. So in the same breath, Hal Grimson must also have a plan B in mind if plan A is nullified. And thus far, I am not seeing a plan B in previous games. The subs which have been made have been lukewarm. Nicholson, Burke, not much. Not much at all, especially against weaker opponents, you could say, which we have faced earlier, against Said Kitts. Nicholson was poor coming on. Same could be said of Burke. Johnson, I would say, is the only bright spot which I have seen some positivity from and where the game have changed once he is introduced on the field of play. But for the others, very little in terms of impact on the game. I'm beginning to wonder if the youngster Whisper may now get a run ahead of a Nicholson or a Burke. That youthful exuberance may very well suit him and suit this Jamaican team. Just, the youngster leading the more seasoned player on a more positive note and, fearless, just approaching this game fearless and just giving his all. So it would not surprise me if going forward as a plan B, Whisper may very well get a nod ahead of Nicholson, who has gotten, I would say, adequate chances to really impress, but thus far have failed to lay down any sort of a marker. So a plan B is a must for Hal Grimson. I am not sure how he will devise or what tactics he may come up with, but for sure, if the team is nullified, and of course, as mentioned, if the team goes down early, then obviously the approach has to change because really there is no tomorrow. You must get a result from this game one way or the other in order to progress into the next round of the competition. And the next round would be the final. So I am definitely looking forward to that. This should be a good test of his tactical nuance. of his tactical knowledge, and the coaching staff around him should be, coming up with a game plan and give it their input and seeing how best they can take on this Mexican outfit. Of course, Mexico coming into this one as well should be confident. A rocky start in terms of the background to their entry into this year's Gold Cup. But once they started in the Gold Cup, it has been all guns blazing. But I do believe they are still a bit fragile. And if Jamaica can get a quick start on them and maybe even an early goal, then we will definitely see a test of their mental strength and their mental capacity and see how they react. Even that game against Qatar, they dominated Qatar, but still could not find a way to the goal. So while they created chances, while they had 25 clutch shots, they still could not penetrate the Qatar defense. And this has to be part of the thinking from the Jamaican and from the Jamaican rearguard. They should take a page from the Qatar, a book, and try to match that tenacity and that defensive brick wall which Qatar put up, which pretty much led to Mexico blanking and Qatar running away 1-0 winners. So while the Mexicans may be strong, while they are ranked ahead of Jamaica currently in the FIFA rankings, they are not without their flaws. They are not without weaknesses, and it is up to the players and the coaches to expose and exploit these weaknesses come Wednesday. So it will be an interesting tactical matchup to look forward to. It should be a pro-Mexican crowd as well, and that could possibly play a very important role in setting that atmosphere. We saw the effect which the Guatemalan crowd had on the Jamaican team, especially in the opening exchanges. It was end-to-end early on in that game, and that was fostered by that raucous excitement which the Guatemalan crowd brought to that match. And if the Mexican crowd can do such a thing as well, which as I am anticipating, it should be a pro-Mexican crowd, the stadium, it should be filled with Mexicans for this one. Very few Jamaicans may make that trip out there in the desert to support the Jamaican team. So it will be a all Mexican stadium, fan base, spectators, and if they can somehow intimidate the Jamaican team mentally, then it could possibly lead to mistakes, and it could very well lead to Mexico taking an early lead in that game. So it is up to Jamaica to weather the storm early, similarly to how they weathered the storm against Guatemala. And then, of course, as they grow into the game, it should settle the crowd a bit. And if they could possibly get an early goal, then that will quiet the crowd for sure. So that has to be the mindset. So it's going to be a test of the mental strength of this Jamaican team as well. But from what I've seen, the team has good spirit. They are developing a good chemistry, a good understanding of each other. And the coach seem to be working on their minds. I could see a bit more calmness, for example, from the likes of a Low in the Guatemalan game, when in previous game, it would be some rash, unnecessary tackles. And speaking of Low as well, I saw a shrewd tactical move by the coach where Low was allowed to somewhat play a more advanced role, especially on set pieces, where he would go up for a set piece and on the second ball, on the second break, rather than getting back into his defensive shape, he would stay up. And on a few occasions, in the regular flow of the game, I saw him making some forward runs, and that has to be under the instruction of Coach Hallgrimson. So that is something we need to look out for if Low will continue to make those forward runs in this Mexican game, adding an extra body in the penalty area and trying to get on to the end of a cross. So I spotted that tactic, and it will be interesting to see if it is repeated in the Mexican game. Very interesting. I'm seeing a number of, small tweaks and changes from Hallgrimson. And these are the small things which can make the big difference, especially at the higher end of matches. It could be the difference between a 1-0 and a 0-0 draw, or going behind early, or scoring a goal late. It's the little things sometimes which set these teams apart, especially when the talent is matched. Then it may very well come down to a chess game, a tactical game, a tactical showpiece or masterclass. And oftentimes it's the coach which is more proactive and less reactive that ends up with the victory. So for sure, viewers and subscribers, tune into this one. I am definitely looking forward to it. Coming up on Wednesday over there in Nevada, 9 p.m. Jamaica time. And I am definitely looking for a Jamaica victory and a progression on to the finals come Sunday. So viewers and subscribers, just like to thank you again for tuning in to us here on Beating the Press podcast. Please continue to share, like, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so as yet. And again, I really do appreciate the support that the platform have been getting over the last couple of weeks, and I can definitely see that it is being reflected in the growth in the number of subscribers to the channel. Please help me to continue to grow the channel by, of course, if you haven't subscribed as yet, please hit that subscription bell, and of course continue to share and give greater visual ability to the podcast. But viewers and subscribers, Jamaica versus Mexico, the big one. I will see you again to preview, hopefully, the final, when Jamaica may very well be taking on either the US or Panama. That is the hope. But until next time, this is Rafa signing off.